Hello, hello, and welcome to Decaf, a production of the Beacon Center of Tennessee. Taylor and Mark back with you after several technical difficulties and a coffee refill for me because of it. But we are so happy to be back with you. We have so much going on in our personal lives, in our professional lives. I'm planning a wedding. Mark's planning to go to Europe for like so long. I feel like he should get his mail sent there. We've got the legislative session going on. We've got polls going on. We have so much going on that it is nice to scale Decaf back to once a month, but we do miss you guys. And we also miss just like shooting the breeze and talking about fun things and talking about what Beacon's doing. And yeah, I missed everyone. Mark and I still talk every day, but missed you guys.
I know this is fun to do. And not only that, I didn't tell you this, that I feel like our podcast actually inspired something. My friends, Sean and Matt do a podcast called Nailing History, where they just talk about history stuff. And they definitely got the idea from how good we are together and how good this podcast is. So he always listens. So like they now have a podcast that you can listen to. And I mean, I don't know what they talk about. I mean, it's kind of stuff that we wouldn't care about, but it's interesting nonetheless if you're into history and talking about it. So, but it's cool that we were able to inspire other podcasts.
You can officially put that on my resume, put it on my headstone one day. Taylor was an inspiration. It's official.
Maybe you listen to podcasts before you want to say that you're an inspiration for that. But no, I mean, they're funny and they're interesting. So it's a good podcast so far.
We'll take what we can get. Beggars can't be choosers. I mentioned a few minutes ago that we have been working on a poll. We released our April poll last week, and we wanted to do a podcast about it, but things got crazy, and I was in New York, and there was all kinds of things going on, and we didn't get to do it. So we're doing it now. And we're going to tell you about some of our best findings now. And there were a lot of great findings. We'll get to all of them, but you might have noticed that over time we have focused on different things in each individual poll. We've talked about healthcare, we've talked about education. This month we talked about, or this quarter, we asked questions about the economy. And we found that Tennesseans think that, for example, the business tax needs to go, that penalizes small businesses for basically just existing. Gotta go, gotta get reformed, something's gotta happen to it. They also think that the US tax system is inefficient, ineffective, not super great, whatever. But the most, I will use Mark's language, the most heartening result was a result of a question that we asked about socialism versus capitalism. A lot of people don't spend as much time scrolling social media as I do. I'm kind of a ghost on social media. I come out every now and then, but I mostly just scroll and watch. And capitalism gets a really bad rap on social media. People tend to think that they glorify socialism and say like things would be so much better if we all just had this, that, and the other. And I do think that that is just the opinion of a minority, but a loud minority. And the results came back, and honey, I was right. I love being right. Tennesseans absolutely, unequivocally favor capitalism. And you can say what you want about capitalism. Mark has always said, like, capitalism, the way that we do capitalism right now is not perfect because we've never tried perfect capitalism. There are a lot of invisible, like just not even invisible hands in the market. Like we want the invisible hands. These are like real hands of the government reaching into the market. So we've never really tried capitalism. But ideally, and in the practice that we've experienced, Tennesseans are super on board.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is too, when you explain what it actually is and what it means, because you've had, I mean, the far left kind of demonize capitalism, but even in Tennessee, we see even Democrats support capitalism over socialism by 15 points. So this is something like you said, it's like the loudest voices in the room, and a lot of people, I mean, the strongest supporters of socialism are between like 18 and 30. I guess they just don't know better, and that's why
They ain't never paid taxes in their life. They've never paid taxes. They don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. And the thing is, socialism will take all of your money for taxes, but
Right.
it's interesting to see this because it's kind of different from what you see in other states. But nationally, you see about 20 to 25% of people support socialism. In this state, we're under 10%, and it's a plus 49 for capitalism. And there's clear definitions of that. And I would urge everybody on both sides of the spectrum to actually understand what you're talking about. Don't call somebody socialist because they want a little bit more government. You might disagree, but it's not socialist. It might be closer to socialism, but it's not socialist to say, oh, I want a little bit more government. And it's not and you can't say, oh, this person's a capitalist when there's like, oh, I want corporate welfare. That's the exact opposite of capitalism. And anybody who's right is so, and this like, I think I heard this term late stage capitalism, which is if you say that, you're the dumbest person in the world because you have no idea what you're talking about, which that's a shout out to the new CEO of NPR who actually said that. But it's when you talk about definitionally what it is, like don't let the political pundits fool you to say, oh, this is that there's definitions for it. And when people hear the definitions, the very clear definitions, socialism is the government control over the market, over businesses owning, and capitalism is the opposite. People do support it. And Tennessee is obviously a much more free market state than most states in the country. I will say that. So that plus 49 would probably not be the same in Massachusetts or New York or California. Sure. But I still think people, for the most part, they certainly believe in capitalist, ideals, even if they don't know it's capitalism. So that was a really good result. I mean, it's something that we love to see from Beacon. There were some results we didn't love to see, unfortunately, but that's the point of our poll, is that we're asking and we want to get the real answers, even if we don't like them. And, we even had some of the people on the far left tried to criticize us. It's like, all these results you're pointing to are the opposite of what we think. So the fact that we share that with you shows you how honest we are and how we're transparent, how we're transparent with that. So it was an interesting poll, because you kind of had the left saying, oh, they're awful. And they're like, oh, look at these great results we love. It's like, you can't pick and choose what results you like. Oh, this poll's illegitimate because of this result, but this one was so good that what a great poll. Let's talk about it.
I know. I think that Mark is like peak Mark on poll days, because that's when he can get in Twitter fights. And they're not even Twitter fights. There's just things that me being so non-confrontational and like hiding under the kitchen table when Mark signs on to Twitter that like I would never say. But people were saying like, well, Beacon Center's hiding their results and not being transparent. And Mark tweeted back and goes, no, you're seeing those results because they're on our website. Like, people just don't even think. So yeah, we share everything, even things that we don't agree with, because it is a gut check for us. Either we're barking up the wrong tree or our messaging is wrong on things. We share everything, and it is educational to us as it is with you guys. We asked a lot of political questions too. We asked about the approval ratings of the job performance ratings of each of our like three, I guess, biggest statewide elected officials: Governor Lee, Senator Blackburn, Senator Haggerty. All three favorable job performance ratings per Tennesseans. That was a really good sign for them. And
let me add something to that too, because I think that's important. And those are the only three statewide elected officials. And the one cool thing that's worth noting is, like, there was a lot of people still undecided. I mean, Bill Lee is easily the most popular politician in the statewide. He's plus 20. Actually, Marsha Blackburn and Haggerty, even though they had really good, they were both plus 13, so 13% more people approved than disapproved. In some ways, the left actually kind of took that as the people running as a good result, because they did worse than the generic, like, Trump won by 20 something, 23, 24. So they're only 13 above. And their approval ratings were both pretty low overall, because so many people were undecided. I think Marsha Blackburn was 42%, and Bill Hager was only 34%.
I know.
Basically, a lot of people didn't know who he was yet, because he's not necessarily on Fox News every day like Marsha Blackburn is. So that was a weird one where, like, yes, they should be happy that they're like, any politician that's over water is good. But there was some signs that the Democrats might be like, well, a lot of people have either are unsure about them or kind of neutral on them. And there's potential. And you see the same thing where Blackburn was only up 16 on Gloria Johnson, which fell substantially behind the head-to-head of Trump and Biden. When you look at that, it was about 10 points behind that. So there was some signs that, even though, the Republicans were doing pretty well, and it's Bill Lee specifically, that the Democrats, especially in the Blackburn race, were taking some, like, they said they thought there's some positives for them in that poll as well.
Yeah, so you just teed me up perfectly for my next point, which was the election questions that we asked. Two things that I want you to kind of talk about the numbers on. One, Biden had a pretty substantial shift in Tennessee from the last poll to this poll, which you can see a cutie little graph on beaconpoll.com that moves. I love it. I love anything cute. But then also, what I think is so interesting as a woman is the woman vote. My mom always says, where are the women going to go? Because where the women go, that's a force. Well, you've got three women basically running kind of at the front of this U.S. Senate race. You've got Blackburn, who's obviously already in the seat, and then Johnson and Bradshaw, who are the top two vying for the Democratic nomination. Now, I won't say that women always vote for women. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that everyone pursues specifically the suburban woman vote. Like, that is something that is talked about so much during election years, presidential election years, the suburban woman vote, because, honey, we talk. And we talk to everybody and we talk to each other, and we tend to kind of share the same ideas. And so it's interesting that there are three women running. but women don't necessarily always vote for women. I don't know. I'm kind of tossing this around as like this is going to be an interesting social study once this is over of where the women went when there are 3 women in the race. I don't know. I just think that's super interesting.
Yeah, let me make a point about the suburban woman vote because I think that does matter. And I think that the reason that people go after them is not because, they talk or agree, in my opinion. It's because they're the most likely to move, where a lot of them tend to be socially liberal and fiscally
Right.
conservative. And that's kind of behind the reason that people think that Biden beat Trump was because of the shift in that, where they kind of went with Trump the first time. So it's an interesting, and honestly, if you see the shifts demographically, what you're seeing right now is suburban voters, generally suburban white voters, are moving towards the Democratic Party, and minorities are moving towards specifically Donald Trump and the Republican Party, especially in the Hispanic and Black communities. So you kind of have this it's a shift of electoral politics, which is just interesting in its own. And it'll be interesting to see where these, suburban and specifically suburban white voters go for this next election, because they're not happy with Biden, but they still don't like Trump. So that all to say, the poll is interesting. Biden actually picked up I wouldn't say it was momentum, but he's made it a little bit closer, and it's more of a loss of Trump votes, where Trump is still up 26 points head to head and 20 points with RFK Jr. involved, but that's 7 and 6 points different than it was last time. And it is noticeable. I think the one thing I noticed, which I thought was so interesting, was that if you look at the presidential race among African-American voters, RFK Jr. wins. RFK Jr. has 35%. Biden has 24, Trump has 22. So this is when you look nationally, this is such a big, it's 100 and I think about 120 something, African-American voters. So it's not a huge sample size, but nationally, that's kind of a sign that, look, African-American voters are not happy. They don't like Biden. They didn't vote for Trump the first time, and they want somebody else. And they might not, I don't know what their opinion of RFK Jr. is, but he's just somebody else. And maybe they like him. And maybe it's like, well, I know I hate these two, so let's try something. But that's a really, damning result for Democrats. And if that holds, Donald Trump will be ecstatic, because he doesn't necessarily even need to get those votes. He just needs them not to go to Joe Biden.
He just needs them not to go there. Yeah.
Whether they don't show up and vote or whether they vote for RFK Jr., he loves that. But in the rest of the state, most of the RFK Jr. voters are people who actually would have been Trump supporters. So it's a really interesting dynamic. There's not much intrigue to be honest, there's not much intrigue in the presidential race in Tennessee, but it's interesting to see how that will relate to other states. The other point to make is, you said it's 3 women. It is 3 women, but it's really 2 women. Marquita Bradshaw is far behind.
Right.
But there's one thing I want to talk about is
there's still a race. There's still a race to be run, and so I'm still crediting that to happen.
And one thing that has not been talked about in the media really at all, which is interesting, is Marquita Bradshaw is down 31 points to Gloria Johnson, but 52% of people are undecided, which is an enormous number in a primary.
Huge.
And Marquita Bradshaw will appear first on the ballot. And her being first in the ballot with 52% of people undecided, there is science behind the fact that, just who's ever first. And if you continue to have that many people undecided, it's 31 points, but those external factors make things interesting. I don't know that they make it. It's hard to tell if it's going to be competitive or not, because Marquita Bradshaw also has no money and Gloria Johnson has a ton of money, but that does matter. And it does seem like Gloria Johnson is really focused on Marsha Blackburn. And we'll see how that works out. But she needs to make sure she gets past the primary first before she gets to that point.
Yeah, it makes it interesting. It's like when you're watching a sports game, and listen, I joke with Blake all the time. I don't like to watch Alabama games that are close because they make me nervous, but other sports games that are close and there's hope for it, I'm like on the edge of my seat. This is like a little thing that's like, what's going to happen here? What could come of these undecided voters? And that's what makes it interesting. So we will keep an eye on that. And as you know, we will continue to poll it until the fat lady sings, until it's done. Let's talk about, you kind of hinted at this a little bit, but shift to the left, shift to the right. There's becoming a realignment of what people are behind and realignment of ideas. And I think there's also been kind of drips and drops of reasonableness and moderateness in certain media personalities. A few years ago, I guess it's a few years ago now, Bari Weiss left I guess, was it the New York Times, or yeah, it was the New York Times.
New York
Bari
Times.
Weiss left the New York Times because she was like, it's getting too left and it's not reasonable and I can't do this anymore. And she started an outlet called the Free Press, which I follow on Instagram. Suzanne and I send each other articles from it all the time. We think it's so interesting because diversity of thought to me is like the most fascinating thing in the world. I loved my political philosophy classes, even though I didn't agree with my professor at all. I think diversity of thought is incredible. Well, it happened again with someone even more high profile than Bari Weiss herself. And I didn't even know about this until Mark pointed it out. But NPR, y'all, one of the like head guys at NPR said, y'all are y'all are like living in a vacuum here. And he pointed it out. He got his mouth duct taped up and he said, never mind, I'm out of here. Mark, I know you got more details than I do on it, but like he published an essay about it in the Free Press, which is Bari Weiss's publication that she started after basically having the same thing happen to her. And for me, it's like so encouraging that like I might not agree with these people, but at least they're embracing diversity of thought and people just being able to say things or report news fairly without this like, you will report it this way because this is the way to report it, or else we're going to shut your mouth. Like, I think it's beautiful. I think it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and I actually kind of, I think I agree more with your second point. I don't think it's about moderateness. It's just about telling the news correctly and
Sure.
admitting when you were wrong. Because his whole point was, his big issue with NPR, and he said he's very left of center. Like, I think he's much farther left than
Mm-hmm.
Bari Weiss is, where she's kind of moderate left. He's pretty
Mm-hmm.
far left. But he said, well, you have to hold yourself honest. Whether it's the Hunter Biden laptop story, which they said was a non-story because they chose not to, whether it was COVID and some of the responses of that, or whether it was the Russia gate, Trump thing. He's like, they had one point of view, which is bad to begin with. And then they
Yeah.
weren't willing to say that they were wrong. And he said, NPR's he's always been left. NPR's always been a little left, but they've been a good news organization. And that's changed over the past 5 or 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it was such a strong article because it's not coming from somebody who's right of center complaining. It's coming from somebody who agrees with them or agree
I
with them and
know.
said, but you need to be honest and you need to be held accountable when you have wrong opinions. And it was great. And essentially he did this all, basically blasted it. NPR, at that point suspended him, which I mean, truthfully, they had to. He just criticized their thing. And then he
Mm-hmm.
quit. Because he's like, I'm not going to be this. And the new CEO is, wow, she is out there, very far left. And again, it's crazy that she would be put the CEO. And the thing is, NPR is not MSNBC. It's MSNBC has a very explicit left lean. That's what they do. That's their thing.
Yeah.
NPR is supposed to be straight news.
I
Everyone knows
know.
they have a left lean, but this is like, and same with CNN. CNN's supposed to be straight news. So this
Uh,
left leaning and this kind of thing is really, really an issue because that's what people who are like, I want to hear it straight. That's where they go to. And that is so discouraging. And he's right. Everything he said was right. That's something, it doesn't matter where you are politically. Like when you're wrong about something or you said, oh, we didn't take this into consideration. We didn't think the Hunter Biden laptop was news. We thought the Russia thing was true. And we're just going to report it as fact, not like, oh, is there questions about it? Like every single one of those things was absolutely true. And it was really good to read. And not from a, oh, I'm, right or whatever. It's more like, I just want fairness. And I want somebody who's supposed to be a news organization to be able to show both sides of it and just tell a story, not say, oh, I want you to believe what I think, or I'm not going to cover this because of that. And, we have the same issue with Fox News on one side, you have MSNBC on the other side, but NPR should be held to a higher standard as an organization that's supposed to be news.
I agree. And I think by moderate, I more meant like his views might not shift moderate, but he's willing to go in the middle to say like this is what needs to be reported, not all the way over here, not all the way over
just
here,
news. Yeah,
but just
just
come
news, the
on
right
into the
thing.
middle and say straight up and down what is going on here. That's what I think is it's missing. I mean, I remember a few years ago I found a little they're all over the internet, but those charts of where each publication lies
Yeah.
kind of on an axis of like farther right, farther left, more reporting, more opinion, stuff like that. And NPR was kind of close to the middle. It was like there was the middle line, and NPR was a little bit to the left, and Wall Street Journal was a little bit to the right, and then everything else branched from there. And NPR, yeah, arguably has gone very, very far left to the point where I unfollowed them on Instagram, and now I follow a lot of news sources on Instagram that like they show like the three sides, the red, the blue, and the purple, because NPR is no longer something that I can look at and count on to be like that. And so it's really another thing that is heartening to us this week is someone there recognized it, and not just recognized it and said, well, I know it's happening, but I'm just going to sit here because I'm getting paid and I got a nice cushy job and people know who I am. He recognized it and he said, I'm actually out because I'm going to stand on principle. And and I love people who stand on principle. That's like fuel for my soul.
I'd probably bet about 10 grand that he goes to the Free Press next. I mean, it seems like
Oh,
it's pretty obvious. I mean, he's still not like, he might try to get hired by like Fox News, but it seems like he is not into that. And I would say
no.
one other thing too about what you're saying. Always make sure you check sources. We always say that about like polls, right? It's like you need to look at every single thing in the question and where they're coming from, because that's how you get information. That's always important you do that. And even those like right left charts, most of those are slanted and biased too, because it depends who puts them together. So you always need to look. I know that we do this, like you need to look at, how they do it. What is the way they do it? And is all the information being put out there? Because obviously NPR, there would be some, like, even when it said center left, it's been pretty left for a while, but it's like I don't even think we knew how far left it was until you see something like this come out. So it's really, this was such a good, I think it was good. And I think it's sometimes, that you need to have people who are honest brokers on the left and the right to be able to check themselves. And it was really good to have somebody on the left do that.
We love a gut check. That's why, that's what we do at Beacon all the time. That's why we poll. That's why I go out into communities and ask people what's really bothering them and hurting them. We respect, because we are principled, we respect someone who's willing to gut check themselves and their assumptions and their solutions and what they think. And when someone in the media does it, honey, fuel from my soul. Let's talk about something that we have a different opinion on. I feel like we're talking about women a lot today, but I don't do basketball. Okay. It's just not something that I do. I do a March Madness bracket for the sole purpose of beating Blake, and which I did this year. Thank you very much. But I don't follow the WNBA, but I have been following the rise of Caitlin Clark. Everybody's been following the rise of Caitlin Clark. She's like got every endorsement deal under the sun. She's got like $3 million in endorsement deals. She was the #1 pick in the WNBA draft. And I'm going to be honest, I've never watched the WNBA game in my entire life. The only person was Lisa Leslie in the WNBA. I remember she was on a Disney Channel show. Remember that Disney Channel show, The Jersey? I remember her from that Disney Channel show long time ago. But that's really the only name in the WNBA that I've ever known until now, Caitlin Clark. And it has gone so social media viral that Caitlin Clark's salary is like not that great. And male NBA players are making like millions of dollars as starting salary, and she's making like in the 70 something thousand range. Now she is raking in endorsement deals. I have kind of split feelings about that. I know, Mark, you have some feelings too. I'm going to just like give a little taste of my feelings. My feelings are like, I do get it because the WNBA doesn't bring in as much money as the NBA does. So like I understand that the salaries can't be as high because it's just not that big of a, it's like an indie film star versus like Brad Pitt. Like indie films aren't going to make as much money as like a blockbuster in the big megaplex movie theaters will. So like I do understand that. But to Caitlin Clark, I want to say, sister, your days of having to run around are done. You're still going to get endorsements because you're Caitlin Clark. Don't make 70 something having to run around and sweat all the time. Go like be a bookkeeper and sit in the air conditioning and like chill. I don't know. That's what I would do. If somebody said this is your salary and you still have to run up and down a court all day, every day, honey, I'm not doing that. No, sirree.
Yeah, I think she likes playing basketball, so that's probably one of the reasons that and also that'd be the greatest job in the world for most people, but you're in a weird spot on that.
I don't like to run. I don't like to sweat. That is just what it is.
So there's a couple things that are important to note here. And I think this is a discussion that needs to be had, and nobody's really hit the right note on this, in my opinion. So first of all, is Caitlin Clark worth more than she's getting paid? Probably. Now, what is the reason for that? It's not just the WNBA doesn't make as much money, and the WNBA loses money. They're subsidized by the NBA. So they actually literally lose money.
Right.
So that's number one. Here's the issue is that the WNBA and the NBA, both of them are essentially socialist. you can only make a certain amount of money. The salary she got was not negotiated. The salary is set. The number one pick can only make this much money. And this NBA, I think it's 51 million over 5 years. I think WNBA, it's like 4 years, 360 something thousand. That has nothing to do with anything. It's because they have limits on it. You can only pay somebody so much. There's limits to what you can make. Caitlin Clark is probably worth $5-6 million a year. I mean, hell, Ice Cube offered her $5 million to go to the Big Three, and Dave Portnoy offered $10 million to play on his rec league team. So she could have made more money. But this is the NBA structure and the WNBA structure. This is not capitalism. And people say it. Capitalism would be like, she is worth a certain amount of money. Guess what? LeBron James is not worth $30 million a year. He's worth like $200 million a year. And guess, but the Lakers couldn't sign other good players because they put a cap on it. So this is not capitalism. And this is what you get when you put all these regulations on what they can spend. Because guess what? Somebody's worth what they're worth. There's no max to that because you have two players in the NBA say that are worth $30 million a year. That's the maximum you can pay them. One player might be like the 35th best player in the league. The other player might be the first best player in the league. They're not worth the same amount. So that's the absolute first point. Caitlin Clark is worth more, and that's because of their salary structure that they did that. And that's why I love the MLB does not have that. MLB gives you what they think you're worth, and I think that's great. So
I think
that's my biggest takeaway. But yeah, women's basketball players generally don't deserve to make more or less. I mean, I think everyone has different things, and people forget. Do you know how many games WNBA plays?
Honey, I ain't never watched a game. I don't even know what night they're on.
Well, I mean, it's different nights. They don't play one night.
Whatever. Whatever.
Yeah, so nothing. But the thing is, the WNBA plays for the summer. They play less. They play 3 months of basketball. It's less than half the games that NBA plays. It's not even close. I think it's like 36 games. And the NBA plays 82 plus playoffs, and they just it's not even close. That's the same thing. Like, oh, teachers are underpaid. Like, maybe they are, but you're underpaying them for 9 months a year if you put that out to a 12. And I'm not saying they're not underpaid, but you're not. Basically, you can be a teacher and a WNBA player, and that's why WNBA players go overseas and play for way more money during the season. So they have an option. It's not like that's all they do. Or they coach college basketball team. Dawn Staley, who's the coach of the national championship South Carolina team, coached college basketball and played in WNBA, and she could take two jobs at once. So people are dumb. They don't understand anything. I still don't. Here's my other opinion too. I think women's college basketball is truly growing. I think it wasn't just Caitlin Clark. I think it's women's college basketball. I don't think the WNBA is going to grow that much. I think it's cool right now. It might grow for a year or two, but women's college basketball is much better. And I think it's a better thing. And, I just don't think the WNBA is going to grow the way that people think it is. And I think Caitlin Clark is a special talent. She's like Steph Curry. And I think that there is some up and coming Juju Watkins, specifically from USC, some up and coming stars in college, but the college basketball setup is just so much better. And, so I do think Caitlin Clark, my takeaway is Caitlin Clark does deserve to make more money, but it's impossible for her to make more money because she's worth more money to Indiana Fever, but it's impossible because of the structure set up, which limits capitalism. And that's on the WNBA and the NBA for doing that.
Okay, I actually wholeheartedly agree with every single thing you just said. And I actually don't know if that's ever happened before. So maybe we need to take a moment, but I agree. I mean, I think that the value that she brings to the team outside of her athleticism, but also just being herself and having the eyes of America on her and on the WNBA is true. But I also think that people on social media are just equality or whatever you want to call it for everyone. Everyone should make the same amount of money. That's also not right. So quit. I think you're right. It's super annoying. You're right. It's not value based.
Yeah, and I love Caitlin Clark. I just want to say one more thing. People say, could she play in the NBA? Not only could she not play in the NBA, I don't think there's a college basketball team she would start for, a Division I college basketball team. So it's maybe she would get some minutes on Mississippi Valley State, who had 2 wins this year. Maybe she could come off the bench and get some minutes because she can still shoot. But it's there's this whole argument, would she be in the NBA? And if you're asking that question, you have never watched sports in your life and have no idea what the heck you're talking about. You are so drawn in by this equity thing that you have no idea. She could not play in the NBA, not even close. Now, she might be able to be on an NBA team because of the money she would bring in just from sitting on the 12th man on the bench. And when you're down by 30 and you're down by 30 points, you play her. But she is not. I mean, every shot she takes would get blocked. She would have no. She would be, and I'm not taking away from any of her accomplishments. She's great.
No.
But this whole idea that women can play in the NBA is so absurd. And this whole idea that people are talking about UConn, one of the best college teams, could they win? Could they make the playoffs in the NBA? No. They're not even close to the worst NBA team. They'd win maybe one game in an 82 game season. So I'm just off my soapbox. I'm just tired of people with these, clickbait sound bites that have no idea, including people on ESPN. Like Mike
I know.
Greenberg. I'm done with this whole conversation. Caitlin Clark's great. And let's leave it at that. We don't need to compare to NBA players. We can just say she's a great player, one of the best college players ever, and that's it.
Like, and also all these people claim to be so progressive. Well, then why are you trying to make a woman compete against men? Why aren't you elevating a woman for her accomplishments in her field against other women? Like, you don't have to put a woman up against a man and say, like, oh, could she play? Let's elevate her for her accomplishments in her field without having to compare her with men. And don't claim you're progressive if you're doing that, because that is the least progressive thing I've ever heard in my entire life. And don't get me on my soapbox for that. We've been here long enough already. But
One more thing. I need to
preach the paint
trash
off the walls.
I need to trash almost every WNBA player. They're a bunch of just jealous people. They've all been talking so much trash about Caitlin Clark being there. Like, oh, it's going to be different. She has to play against good players. And like all this stuff. Like, oh, I don't think she's the best player. Like, and honestly, they're so jealous of her. It's insane. You have former UConn players. They were on like the ESPN like telecast, and they were just kind of making fun of her. The people were like, oh, she don't win a championship. Like, it is pure jealousy because she's moved the sport in a way you never did. So Diana Taurasi, shut up. Nobody wants to hear what you have to say. She is better than you were in college, and maybe she won't be as good of an WM, but they're just so jealous that they're actually trying to diminish her accomplishments because they're upset they're not the one who raised women's basketball to the point they did. I'm done with all WNBA players who are trashing her.
Which is frustrating for me to see other women tearing women down, and there's only a few spots at the top for everybody to be good. Everyone who wants to be good at basketball can be good at basketball, ladies. You don't have to like say that she's bad to make you look good. It actually makes you look like a petty little middle schooler. Like, let's elevate women. You're playing for the WNBA. Elevate more women to get them to a status where they're recognized as household names, not like tear them down. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. There's room for multiple women at the top. I don't know why adult grown women cannot understand that. It drives me absolutely insane. I hate it so much. That is my crusade.
Nobody's ever said WNBA that excitedly before, but I'm glad that you did.
I'm just saying, like, women supporting women. What happened to that? Yeah. Like, come on. Before we go, I want to talk about a game show that I personally, and also my precious fiance, think that I would be so very good at. And I actually think that Mark would be pretty good too. If you are listening to this and you have not watched Traitors on Peacock, just like DM me and I'll send you my Peacock password. I am willing to share for all of America to watch Traitors. It is that good. Mark and I were trying to figure out what we wanted to talk about that was fun. And we were like, what could we discuss that we both watch? And he said, have you watched Traitors? And I literally started salivating because I'm obsessed with that show so much. I'm like a dog with a bone when Traitors comes on. It is like the very best. It's all of the best things combined. It's Survivor, Big Brother, Celebrity Mole. It's like all of these like incredible shows all combined together with reality stars and celebrities coming at each other and like a member of British Parliament, which like, okay. And they're like trying to weed out who are the traitors in the group? Who's the mole? I used to love that show, Celebrity Mole. I thought it was so good. I watched it all the time. I was like captivated by it. It's basically that with Survivor, Big Brother elements to it. And it's incredible. And basically there's a whole slew of faithful people and they pick 2 to 3 traitors. And the traitors try to make it to the end. And then they can win like all this money if they make it to the end. Or if they weed out all the traitors, then the faithfuls win all this money and the remaining faithfuls get to split this money. And they have all these activities where they try to like compete to put more money in the prize pot. It's like an interesting social study to watch people converse and turn on each other and lie or not lie and tell the truth, but people think they're lying. All I'm saying is I would be an incredible traitor. Now, I'm not a very good liar, actually, so people might sniff me out. But what Mark and I decided was that I would be a really good traitor consultant. I would like be really good to go in the room and help the traitor strategically pick who to kill off because I was screaming at the television. And I genuinely think that if the traitors this season had done what I said that they should do, they would have won the game.
That's and I don't think you'd be an incredible trader. Like I said, I think you actually be a less than average trader, but I think you're because I mean lying is maybe the most
I'm not
important
good
part
at it.
because any good strategy you would still lose right away if you can't lie.
So I'd be
So
like, I'm
yes,
so sorry I
yeah,
hurt you. Like I couldn't do it. Yeah.
yeah. So you would be a bad faithful and a bad trader. I think you'd be voted off right away. But I do think your instincts and strategy would be good. I think I'd be an okay trader. I think I'd be probably a better faithful. I don't think I'd win. And me and my wife talked about this
Mm-mm.
and kind of agree that as faithfuls, I would make it further than her, but she would have a better chance
Yeah.
of winning than me. I think I could really come in the top 6 or something. I don't think I'd win, where she could be one of the first ones voted out because she's quiet and she's the obvious like, oh, let's pick somebody for no reason to throw people
Uh-huh.
off. Or she could win. But yeah, it's a great show, and it's honestly, even the way you explained it, it's almost impossible to explain. You just
It
have to watch
is.
it.
You just have to watch
Um,
it.
but it's good. And my mom started watching, and like, and Kira's the one who introduced me. I started watching this, I guess, like 6 months ago, and Kira watched the first like UK season like a year ago and loved it. And
Oh,
when people tell you to watch shows, you're like, yeah, if I have time. And I eventually did it, and it's a really great show. But it's always interesting, like you said, to think about yourself. Like, how would I be in that situation? And be honest with yourself. Because I think people are like, oh, I'd be so great at this no matter what. It's like, would you be? Because I see these things, and I think it's hard to keep. I would not do a great job of keeping lies straight. I think I'd have a hard time. Like
oh,
I could probably.
spaghetti.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. You would be good at. See, I would be like, oh God, oh, and I might say
What did I
something.
say?
I say dumb things too, where I'd be like, "Oh,
You do,
like
yeah.
I already get murder and banishment confused." So I would say the wrong thing
Oh,
as a
yeah.
faithful. I'd be like, "Oh, I didn't mean it like that. Sorry." And like, so it's an interesting thing, and it's cool. And most of the 2 of the 3 seasons are filmed in Scotland, which is where we're going to
Hmm.
be going. We actually saw how far it would be to get to the Trader's Castle. It's not worth it. It's like
Too
an extra
far,
three
yeah.
hours, and it's
Ugh,
just
no,
that's
don't
all
do
it's
it.
there is the Trader Castle. So it's a great show though. Like you said, there's 2 seasons of Australia, 2 of the UK, 2 of the US, and 1 of New Zealand. And they just keep doing more. So it's a great, great show, and you should absolutely watch it.
I actually think because Blake is very stoic and has a really good poker face, I actually think if Blake went on Traders but had a little earpiece so I could like be half of his brain, we would absolutely kill it because he would act, he'd win an Oscar. We would be
Yeah.
the best trader because then we could like collaborate because we're very compatible brain wise. We could collaborate and strategize and like figure out who should go. I think that would be like a magical, but like also Kira's brain maybe with you as a faithful. I think that if we as couples paired up, you and Kira as faithfuls would do really, really well, and me and Blake as traders would do really, really well.
I
That's
think
what I think.
we would both do worse than our partners, in my opinion. I think our
Oh,
partners
yeah,
would
yeah,
both do
yeah.
better than us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
yeah, yeah. Because I
no,
thought,
that's why I'm saying
because
we need to do it
yeah,
together.
I feel like Blake has a good persona for that. Where now
He
the only thing I would
does.
worry about him is like, I mean, now I don't know him super well, but like he would have to speak up enough because if he was a
I
trader, if he didn't
know.
speak up, they'd be like, oh, if you don't have any opinions, let's get you off. So like he would
I
have to be,
know.
but I think his personality is super good for that. And he seems to, from what I know, but again, I don't know him even close as well as you do, but
Yeah.
like when he says something, it's important and good but
People
he might not
listen.
talk enough. Yeah, he would have to talk maybe a little bit more. Where like you would just be saying everything, which I do
Oh, I
think that
wouldn't
could.
be able to shut up. I can't shut
That,
up.
but
I that
the thing is, you might stay a while as a faithful, but if you were bad at picking out who the traders were, because if you kept saying wrong names, like, oh, let's keep her on, she's just getting rid of all the. Also, you didn't watch season 1, right?
no.
Quinton from season 1 is the worst person I've ever seen in this game. And he was a political consultant. He definitely lost business because he was so loud and like always had opinions. And he was like 0 for 14. And he made the final 3 by being wrong because they're all like, God, he's so wrong. Let's keep him on. Like he's just going to keep picking the wrong people. It
That's
was exceptional.
incredible.
And
Okay, actually, maybe that'd be
Andy
good.
Cohen was like, did you lose business from this? Because like you kept saying you can read people as a political consultant. Like you were wrong every time.
Every time you are not good at that. No, I think that I think that we should put Blake and Kira. Kira's quiet too. Blake and Kira are
Yes.
both very quiet. They have personalities for this, and I
They're
think that
very similar, I think, in this
they're
game. Where I don't
so
think she would talk
similar.
up enough either. But yeah, but when she
No,
talks, yeah,
they're
I agree.
it's so good that we're both with quiet people because can you imagine if we were with people as loud as us? That would be a
No.
nightmare. The house would burn down. Like that would
Yes.
be an absolute nightmare. Like no one could handle it. Wow, we have a plan. Let's put our spouses on the show with little earpieces and then we can play as couples. I'm down for that. I think it's a great plan. If you haven't watched Traders, watch it on Peacock. If you haven't looked at our poll, look at beaconpoll.com. It's honestly so good. These are some of my favorite results we've ever gotten, second highest media coverage we've ever gotten. It's a huge one. We're so thankful to be back with you guys, and we're thankful to be able to have a platform to talk about important things and silly, funny, cool things. And we're thankful that you listen. So if you haven't already, you should subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, thanks so much for that. We will see you in about a month, or I guess Mark will be in Europe, so we'll see you probably a little later than a month.
About
safe
a month.
travels.
I'll be back in a month.
Okay. Well, bon voyage to Mark, and we will see you back in about a month. Thank you again for listening.